This is Don Prieto. Sitting beside me here is Tom Job. We're going to talk about drag racing and automobiles and people and stuff. And hopefully it'll give you an idea of what it was like throughout the 60 or so years that I've been playing with automobiles. And Tom's going to sit here and correct me when I blunder. And the cameraman will occasionally cut in and out so that we can change pictures and not have some crazy mixed bag of stuff here. We're going to do it as best we can. Where did I start? I started. A young man by the name of Arlen Baddow lived across the street from me, and he said one Sunday morning, he said, "How would you like to go to the races?" And I'm like 12 years old. And I said, "Sure, what kind of races?" Because I went to the horse races with my grandfather, so it would have been no big deal. He says, "Well, there's some jalopy races out at Alameda Road in Jefferson Parish." I said, "Okay, I'm ready, let's go." So we went there and sat in the stands and watched a bunch of guys in 34 through 39 coupes and sedans run into one another and spread dirt all over the place and really get filthy. And it was that black, Louisiana black loam that is so fertile for growing sugar cane and stuff like that. It was everywhere. I mean, I was covered. So we watched the races, and he said, "Let's go down in the pits." And so we ventured forth out of the stands and into the really muddy pits, and it'd stick into your shoes, and it was awful. But I was loving it. It was something I had never experienced before. And he was friends with Louis Milano, who owned the ice house in my neighborhood. And Lou had a 34 three-window that he was racing. And the other guy that was in the picture, in the pits there, was Not Farrington, who would go on to be the guy that taught me everything I needed to know about running flatheads and stuff like that. And so we wandered around, looked at those cars, and took me home. And I was essentially hooked on this kind of activity. It was a competition and noise and fast and what have you. The dirt was a little bit much, but I got started fooling with automobiles at that point. And so I got on my bicycle that week, the following week, and I rode over to the ice house, which was about a half mile from my house.
And this is all in New Orleans?
Well, yes, I don't leave New Orleans until 1963 to come to California. So all this stuff that I'm going to talk about in my youth was essentially being raised in New Orleans, and some in the military, but it was still in Louisiana. Anyway, I ride my bicycle over to the ice house, and I'm looking in the window, and I can see the race cars, and there's a couple of hot rods in there. And Leonard Held had a beautiful 34 coupe for the street, and there was a 44, a gold 40 Ford, and a kind of a rose-colored 32 roadster that belonged to a guy named Needles. I never actually found out what his name was, but everybody called him Needles. And so finally Leonard sees me hanging on the window, and he says, "You want to come in and see these cars?" And I said, "Sure." So he walked me in, and he was the brother-in-law of Louis. And so Louis comes over, and I told him that I had seen him out at Alameda Road racing, and so he gave me the full drill, picked me up and put me in the car. I mean, he immersed me completely. So I was a fan from that point on. I didn't do much in the way of, I went to the races a couple of times, but not very often, but I hung around on my bicycle watching what was going on. They'd let me watch them repair cars, because the ice house was not only an ice house, but it was also their shop. They worked on everything in the shop. And Not Farrington's place was over on Bank Street. And he not only had the car that he raced at the dirt track, he had a 39 coupe that was to die for, with a 3 carburetor flathead, you know, and a 13, 14-year-old kid hanging there looking in the engine compartment at all that shiny with the acorn nuts and the polished heads. And I mean, it was a dazzler. And he claimed to have the fastest car in town. And of course, that when you're a little kid, the superiority of something really gets your attention. If you're in the 3rd place car or something, you don't pay attention. But if it's the fastest car in town, my God, that's got to be really something. So I hung around with him, and when I turned 15, Donnie Lagarde and I, my neighbor Donnie Lagarde and I, we bought a 38 Ford coupe from John Manali for $15. He says I paid him $25. I paid him $15. I couldn't have raised $25. So we get this car, and I can't bring it home because I'm not old enough to have it. And so we keep it down the street down by my girlfriend Joanne's house, such as it was. And we started taking parts off and putting parts on and what have you. And we go burning up the tires on the street. And of course, this is 1953, so there's not a lot of traffic in New Orleans, and most of the roads are gravel and dirt. There's a few paved roads. Apple Street was paved, and it was really smooth, and you could really smoke the one tire on the back of this 38 coupe, right? So we had that for a while, and I broke the axle key, and it wouldn't move. The car wouldn't drive, and we looked around, and because it didn't make any noise when it broke. And then I'm sitting in there running the pedals and stuff and running the motor, and Donnie's standing by the back wheel, and he sees the axle nut turning. And so neither one of us knew anything about that. So I got on my bicycle, and I rode over to Knot Shop, and I said, I got a bit of a problem with my car. I put it in gear and go to drive, and the only thing happens is the axle nut turns in the back. He says, oh, here. He slides the drawer open, pulls out an axle key, hands it to me. He says, here, go put this in. Well, I'm not going to ask him how to put it in, right? He just gave me the axle key. Now I got to find out how to do it. And so I go home, and we jack it up, and it was a big axle nut, so we had to get a special wrench and a cheater bar to get it loose. And sure enough, we slid it out of there, and the key was sheared in half. We put the axle key in. My first repair job. We went down the street. So I was an official mechanic at that point in my own eyes. If you fix something and you make it work, you've accomplished something. And up till then, I had worked on bicycles and model airplanes. Did a lot of model airplanes stuff in this same interim period in high school. And this little car, which I eventually abandoned out at Audubon Park because it wouldn't go any further. I think it was out of gas, and I had had enough of it. The holes in the floorboard were such that when you drove it down the road, the exhaust fumes would come in the car, and it'd usually be 3 of us. And as Donnie would get that window, I'd get this window, and Charlie Nash would sit in the middle and just get almost asphyxiated riding in this car. But we were 15 and we were hauling ass, right?
No lies.
Oh, no. Well, I had a driver's license at that point, but my dad had no idea that I had the car. None. And it was always a hit and miss kind of a proposition. So then I had a paper route, and I started saving my money because I was going to buy me something worthwhile. And on the paper route, I ran into a 33 Ford Cabriolet with a for sale sign on it. This is the car. And the guy wanted $125 for it. And I said, okay, I will bring you the money. Each Saturday when I collect from my paper route, I will bring you money toward paying it. And he said, fine with me. And the car had a column shift, juice brakes, a 21 stud flathead, wire wheels, and it was full fendered, but the fenders were rusty and beat up. But the car was pretty solid. The interior was nice. So I paid him, I think I got up to $100, and he says, here, take it, and gave me the keys. So I got a 20% discount by holding out. And I took it home, and I told my dad about this one. And he said, well, you don't drive it until you get insurance.
Are you still 15?
It's September 53, so I'm 17 now.
Oh, 17. Okay.
17. October, I'd have been 17 in October of
So you're just 17.
Of 53. And I brought it home and I parked it in the yard behind the garage, and I started fooling with it. I took the distributor off. I cleaned everything. All I could afford to do was clean, so I just started degreasing everything. And I took the distributor off and I laid it aside, got it all clean, and cleaned the front of the engine, I pulled the spark plugs out, cleaned them, put them all back together. Put it together, put the ignition back on, and it started. Whoa. How about that, sports fans?
You are a mechanic.
I'm definitely a mechanic. Turns out you can't put the distributor in wrong, because the slot for the key to the distributor in the camshaft is offset to the side, so you can only put it in one way, and I didn't change anything internally, so how could I go wrong? But I didn't know that. See, I thought I put it back like I found it, which I did, but when it started, you couldn't have touched me, man. It was really something. So that was the car that got me through high school. Once I got the insurance, I think the insurance was $41 for the year, which was a lot of money when you were making like $6 to $8 a week with your paper route. And I would do odd jobs. My grandfather would take me to the racetrack. He was pretty frail at that point, but he was the night watchman at the racetrack. And he and I would go, this is the fairgrounds in New Orleans, we'd go to the racetrack, and he'd get me to hot walk some horses for the couple of the owners and things like that, gallop them and, exercise them, and then close up the place and close all, because all the gates, there was hundreds of gates to this place, and we'd go lock them all. And then he'd send me home in his car, but I had to go straight home. Couldn't stop anywhere. And he was an ex-policeman, so there was no messing with him. So I made a few bucks doing that, and I had a good time, learned a lot, and got the car to where it was in pretty good shape. I got a chrome breather and a chrome air cleaner and some acorn nuts, and I was styling.
I was styling.